Hi, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Sharon, and we are Feet of Clay.
Confessions of the Cult Sisters. Well, folks, I think last time we said that we were going to try to get back on schedule.
Ha ha ha.
We're almost there, but we're just a little bit behind our bi-weekly schedule. And honestly, a number of days later in dropping this episode because life and family.
Yep, absolutely. That's right. And what is your mantra, Tracy, to help us not get obsessed or lose sight of our true higher priorities?
Yes, my mantra is balance. And, but Sharon, and you've been great. Honestly, I've had a really emotional several weeks. And
I know, my friend.
Lots of things. But for those of you who have been following our Instagram, you will see that I have started posting some of the latest from D.L. Mayfield's Strong-Willed Project.
Yeah.
And we're going to put that link in our show notes. And that's a project for those of you who probably can already tell by the headline from our dear James Dobson's Strong-Willed Child shit books that we all read and raised our kids within. And honestly, the timing has been pretty perfect because I'll just suffice it to say, many, many years later, still my family is really healing from a lot of these dynamics that take place in that authoritarian religious environment. So there's been a lot of emotions around that, and we're still healing. And please, if you haven't, go start that project. It's got some really good insight.
Yeah, it does. And you know what? I just realized it's an odd connection here because James Dobson is based out of Colorado Springs, focus on the family.
Springs.
That's that, Rocky Mountain Christian Mecca shit there. Anyway.
With our dear youth with a mission base. Don't forget that.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I could, you shared some links to the podcast for the project with me, and I listened to it. I actually listened to it twice. I've shared a couple of those episodes with my kids and my husband and my therapist. And yeah, it's a lot to dig into, Tracy. And, that might be an episode or two down the road for us because there's so much. So yeah. But now back to our regularly scheduled shit pile, right?
Yes.
What we're talking about today. So, all right, people. Buckle your seatbelts, grab a big box of tissues and or a barf bag. You might need both. Today, we are going to pick up where we left off in our last episode and take a closer look at the specifics of Steve Greisen's felony crime, the sexual solicitation of a trafficked 14-year-old girl.
Yeah. And so, listeners, you can imagine that if I'm already coming off of some emotional stuff that's happening in my world, that honestly, Sharon, I've been dreading this.
I know.
Lots of reasons, but I will say on the day that we're recording this, right, there was another preacher. And of course, Tennessee, for those listeners who know, and if you've listened to Troy and Brian, I don't live in Kentucky, but I do live in Tennessee, where a lot of crazy news continues to happen. And so there was another preacher arrested for aggravated sexual assault against a minor. And
yesterday he bailed out, right? He got bond yesterday.
So he was arrested, and I'm not really familiar with that preacher, except for he is from Tennessee and he is in the fundamentalist Baptist circles. And then immediately following that post that I saw, another headline, I saw that he had committed suicide.
Today.
So he was out on bail and he committed suicide. And I think for me that really helped kind of put into perspective why I've been dreading this episode. It's heavy, heavy stuff. And it's, you have these trusted professionals who get exposed on a grand scale, and all the people that they take down with them. And, this person couldn't face the music and committed suicide. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're handling this with the care that it needs to be handled, because it's serious stuff, Sharon. So that's part of it.
Yeah. Well, as I can't remember if we actually said it, but we're recording this on September 11th in the evening. You sent me the link to that news article 30 minutes before we started recording. So it's like, yeah, holy shit, this shit is everywhere. We'll put something in our show notes, Preacher Boy Pod, with more information on that particular story,
Yes.
if people are interested.
Yeah. And so, as we said, and I guess, we should have trigger warnings, as we say, on everything that we do, because this is heavy stuff. And, when you hear these stories and they're happening so much, and I don't know if you popped in and read any of the comments when these break, but there's just so much to it. And there's so many family circles that kind of get exposed. And I think, I've kind of wrestled within my own self of, are we piling on? Why are we doing this? But just seeing that these are happening at such a large degree, I think it is worth diving in, and particularly into a person that we know personally, and unpacking some of the similarities that we know that we shared in this belief system, and see if we can kind of to find ultimately, is there a way to help prevent some of these tragedies?
Right.
As I mentioned, I don't think I can give enough trigger warnings. So we're going to attempt to talk about this. And of course, this will involve some explicit information about child sexual abuse. So please take care. And again, if you have small people around you when you tend to listen to these, pick another time and make sure that you're in a good space to hear this.
Yes. And in this episode, we are going to try to talk about our personal connections with Steve, take a look at his background, his Christian resume, if you will, ask some questions, explore were there previous indicators, what's been the Christian response from the community. And
that's so important.
Yeah, we really do. So, but also, let me just say, listeners, if you haven't yet heard our last episode, that was with our guests, Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott from LA Not So Confidential, please go back and start there, because that conversation covers some very important terminology, context, and concepts that are going to be foundational to our discussion today.
Yeah, and it's they're really great. I, again, can't thank them enough for coming on to our little pod and joining us on that. And as a reminder, we didn't know about this situation with Steve until a listener had sent us a news link just this summer.
Yeah.
And Sharon and I were practically speechless.
And that is saying something, folks, because Tracy, when the hell do we not have words, right? My God. But, as hopefully people can imagine, it felt like just this tsunami of emotions, disbelief, anger, disgust, pain, heartache, confusion, and compassion.
Yeah.
And I think I'd mentioned, I had these vivid, intense, detailed dreams every fucking night for at least a week. And just the hardest thing to get my head around is this idea that this guy I know, this 6'2", big 68-year-old man who has portrayed himself as a committed, Jesus-loving Christian his entire life, he showed up with $180 in his pocket to pay for the privilege of raping a 14-year-old child. And that's the only way I see it, Tracy. He was paying to rape a child. You can't call it having sex, right? Because that would require two consenting adults.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I remember when the news of Mike Bickle broke, was his situation with the 14-year-old. And I don't know if you remember it, Sharon, but there was almost like a campaign on Instagram from the former IHOP KC circles where everyone said, hey, post a picture of you to these grown women within those circles of you when you were 14 years old. And all of a sudden, post after post of these 14-year-olds, I posted one of myself actually also with a hashtag. I can't remember the hashtag, but just to put out there so that people could have context of what it was like to be 14, to remember being 14. If you have a daughter, niece, anyone who is 14 years old, just putting that into perspective, these children, I mean, many had braces, just, those wide eyes and youthful look. And it's staggering to see that in context of what a 14-year-old really is.
That is chilling. I mean, the hair, I literally, the hair is just standing up on my arms right now. It's like, fuck. Yeah.
And, the other thing that I know I've mentioned in some of my posts too is, and this is from the group of people who try to rescue children
right.
from sex trafficking, right? So it's unconscionable, and we're going to get into more detail, but yeah, when you think of the children, when you think of the child, when you think of a 14-year-old, it's much more, Sharon, than just a freaking headline.
I know. The reality of what he was actually going to do. That's so important. And I know you kind of already said a little bit of it, but before we go any further, I want us to also reiterate to everyone, why are we talking about this? Because I feel no satisfaction. This isn't gloating over someone who's fallen. It's not trying to rub noses in the shit. I mean, if anything, it has been oppressive and depressing, like all the research, all the reading. I mean, it's just like, you just feel, it just is so dark. It's so dark. But I've also had this really big internal conflict because as angry as I am about this whole situation, my heart is also just breaking for the anguish that Nelly and their sons have been put through. And it is not our intent to add to their pain in any way at all.
No, I don't know that we can't, though, right? And that's, I think, why I've dreaded this so much, Sharon, and especially then hearing this news of this suicide that happened, in a similar situation. This kind of news is breaking almost daily.
Yeah.
And it's staggering. It's so staggering, and it is so overwhelming on so many levels. But in the midst of that, like I said, with the comments that people are kind of growing callous to this. And I think because we do have an inroad into all the people that end up really being catastrophically hurt by this, not to mention real victims when there's real victims involved. I think that's the concern, is like, hey, it's almost like the world is growing. I don't know what's the word, like
habituation. It's like we're habitualized to it.
Yeah.
We anesthetized. It's like we're numb. We've grown numb.
Another one. And I think that I've been guilty of that myself.
Me too.
Because when you see the amount of faces and names that are put with, you're like, oh, and I think there's this thing in the back of my head, and maybe many people, when they see these headlines, they were probably these evil, slimy men always trying to get over on people, right? And I think that's why this one's so staggering, because it's like, we're going to talk about, were there any indicators, but we know the background, we know the teaching, we know the passion, we know the zeal, we know the circles. And it's like, how did this happen? Yes.
Right.
All right. So that's what we're going to attempt to do, is unpack what we can put together here. So we did want to mention that we have reached out, and of course that was via email, to both the companies that Steve Greisen is the owner of. And those companies are Real Productions and Exploration Films. And we'll put the links in there. I don't know if you noticed, Sharon, but there's a great little pious statement about how these organizations are to help people really look at films to learn the truth, right? So it's
Excellent.
definitely, in light of everything that's happened, a pretty whoa statement.
Yeah.
So we reached out to them via email, letting them know that we're doing this episode and asking, well, let me just go ahead and read what we wrote in our email.
Good idea.
To Exploration Films, we are former members of Last Days Ministries, and we're neighbors and friends of the ministry and family of Second Chapter of Acts. We now have a podcast called Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters, and in our last episode, August 28th, 2024, we had a discussion with two experts in the field of sexual criminality to discuss terminology, statistics, and psychology related to sexual crimes against minors. The genesis of that discussion was our new awareness of Steve Greisen's guilty plea in March of 2023. In our next episode, which is this one, we plan to explore this matter further with specifics of the situation and the connections with the belief systems to which we used to belong. We have been unable to find any public acknowledgement or statement from Exploration Films LLC or from Steve himself regarding this situation. We are writing today to ask if Exploration Films and or Steve Greisen would care to make an official comment or basic acknowledgement about what happened and or Steve's current progress in the sexual offender program and or the future of Exploration Films. Thank you for your consideration.
And not a big surprise, we have not received a response thus far.
No, the website's still up with no comment or anything.
Nope.
And I wondered if I could still subscribe and get these wonderful films that would teach me the truth. I just wondered that.
Oh, well, you can pay your money if you want to. Well, and if we do get a response in the future, people, we will definitely share it with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So here's why we think it really is important to examine this thoroughly. Tracy, you and I, we were finally able to escape that high control, fundamental, evangelical, charismatic, I want to say bullshit, but belief system. And that's the system that promised all of us this freedom of our souls and power to live a good life and a joyful, happy life. And yet, at the same time, that belief system was teaching us to despise and hate ourselves and to denigrate our own humanity.
Really denigrate our own humanity. And of course, this is the same belief system that Steve Greisen has promoted his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, in his companies, he continues to promote that as well. And the promise of that belief system, I mean, we found it's right. It's so hollow, but it's worse than hollow, Sharon. It's not just benign, right?
Right.
I guess the more we start unpacking all of this and seeing the fallout, it's destructive.
It is. It absolutely is. And that is why we need to talk about it. So Steve's crime, it points directly to this inconvenient reality. There are so many Christians claim that their faith is the answer, right? That's the answer to all our problems. It's the answer to the struggles we have in life. But then when shit like this happens with people in their community, they minimize it or they make excuses or like what we're seeing here, they don't fucking comment at all, like it never happened. So I was thinking of it kind of like the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, right? Like no one wants to talk about it. We're just not going to talk about it. But the problem is, and I thought, these wannabe emperors of the Christian faith, these big leaders and stuff, well, when they take their trousers off, too many of them end up fucking little kids and teenagers. And I am just fucking angry, Tracy. I just feel so angry about this. And at the same time, I want to be compassionate. And my heart does hurt for Steve in certain ways and his immediate family. and the extended family from second chapter of Acts. So it is like a raging tornado inside me, all of this.
Yeah, but, we've seen that this group who's supposed to be the most accountable completely lack accountability, right? And,
Right.
when we did the whole plane crash episodes that we have done and the NTSB, and anytime a crash happens, the amount of analysis that goes into what causes that. And that is glaringly missing in any of these things happening. Nobody is going back through with any kind of glaring report on how did this crash? These meteors of fame and, religiosity, how did these crashes happen?
Right.
They're silent.
Right.
So that's part of why we want to do this. There needs to be an examination and an accountability. And more, which we alluded to in the last episode of the devil made me do it, right? The devil can just make us all do it. Like we're all just one temptation away from that. And it's like, no, motherfuckers, I don't want to screw a 14-year-old. Like, and I know many of really great men who don't want to do that either. So a quick context on Steve, and we'll give more details also later. But for those of you who don't know yet, it just pains me to say this. He is the husband of Nelly Greisen. Her last name was originally Ward. She's of the trio, the second chapter of Acts, brother and two sister group to Matthew Ward and Annie Ward. And of course, Steve, who was kind of more in the background because he was the group's tour organizer for many years. Mm-hmm. And before that, he even did some tour planning for Keith Green. And if you've been following me on Instagram, I've kind of posted some of those connections.
Yeah.
That was back in the early 1970s, before Keith's first album.
Right.
Even.
Before he got all famous.
Yes. Steve later founded what we referenced, the two Christian film companies.
Quote Christian.
Yes.
Let's put them in air quotes.
Real Productions. And, I think he missed an opportunity to do a play on words here for real being REAL, like the real truth. But anyway, he called it real, REEL, as a film, real Productions. That was my little free opportunity for him to market better. Yes. And then later Exploration Films. He creates and promotes quasi documentaries. I haven't watched.
A little cringy. There's a little cringe.
The Search for the Real Mount Sinai. Haven't watched it. Incredible Creatures That Defy Evolution. This reminds me of something your ex-husband would write and sponsor. I haven't watched it. And The Master Designer. Haven't watched that. Others. And more recently, he launched a streaming service. And this is the one I kind of said, hey, I think I could still sign up, called Exploration Flix, Flix, which is promoted as a Christian streaming platform that aligns with your faith.
Quote, that is their tagline. That's who they are. That's their identity. A Christian streaming platform that aligns with your faith. And how the fuck does your behavior, Steve, align with your faith?
With your faith.
All right. In 2004, Steve was co-producer of this film and music project called First Love.
I have seen that.
Me too. That was this gathering of over a dozen really big name Christian music figures from back in the 70s and 80s. So it's a 2-part, 3.5-hour show that includes them all sitting together, singing some of their hit songs and talking about their born-again conversions and reminiscing about their experiences in the Jesus movement. Preview, folks, we are going to have a whole episode going into that, but just wanted you to have that context now.
Yes, we have much more to say about that because I think I actually found that before I heard this news of Steve Greisen.
Yes.
Because everyone's trying to document the Jesus movement now, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to shut up because I have a lot to say about that, but that's coming, folks. We're going to talk more about that
at a later date.
So Steve definitely has what anyone would call an impeccable Christian pedigree. I mean, really, 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 especially by our standards. And remember, we were the elite of the elite,
That's
Sharon.
right. And I mean, we'll get to it later on, but his parents were missionaries too. I mean, it's like the whole package.
I mean, he's got Winky Pratney, Leonard Ravenhill, Youth with a Mission. I mean, I'm telling you, the pedigree, right? Oh, and so now his name is added to really a terrible growing list of so many who have not just fallen a little bit, but fallen hard from these lofty positions of power influence. And of course, again, why we named ourselves Feet of Clay, because everyone ultimately has feet of clay. But there is a long history of prominent Christian leaders who get caught in, horrific sexual abuse scandals. Sometimes they used to be, I feel like, Sharon, just affairs, right? Like, they were just like, hey, this Christian had an affair. They had baby out of wedlock. And you're like, oh, terrible, 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 terrible.
Right.
And of late now, it's like, oh, God for the affairs, right? Like, oh, for the consenting affairs.
God, the good old days when it was just adultery.
When it was just adultery.
Oh, shit.
And God only knows how many have been uncaught, right? That these are the ones that we just hear about. In the 1980s, we saw Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, Larry Tomczak from Sovereign Grace Ministries, People of Destiny. And of course, we all know about Bill Gothard from IBLP. And that seems...
No. Got hard, Tracy. Please say his name correctly,
it's
woman.
So gross now in this subject because I can't.
Got hard.
That barf bag. Cue the barf bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like that was, and this is the 2013 when Bill Gothard came out, 2013, 2014, and all the Sovereign Grace, and that seemed to kick off this whole child thing. And of course, everyone knows about Josh Duggar and his crimes and just the horrible child sexual, what are they? Because I almost said child pornography, but the
sexual abuse images, as we've learned.
Images, yes. And of course, there's still the unfolding scandal of Mike Bickle and the International House of Prayer in Kansas City.
Yeah. And the Josh Duggar stuff was in the Amazon documentary, Shiny Happy People. Was it Amazon? Yeah. Okay. So if you haven't seen that one, folks, definitely go. And again, this time, it's not just the headline. It feels and it is profoundly different for us, right?
Yeah. And, I think that's why it's been good for us to talk about this because, again, we can all just become anesthetized to another headline. And Sharon, like specifically for you, this is not just simply another one bites the dust.
Right. Not just famous names in a news story. So we'll talk about that a little bit here now. As we mentioned last episode, Steve and his wife Nelly and their two sons, they were our literal next door neighbors out in Texas in the 1980s when we were at Last Days Ministries. I mean, we shared a property line, literally next door neighbors. And my husband then at the time, Martin, he and I, we hung out with Steve and Nelly as couples. We got together for dinners. I remember one time we went to this local rodeo together. I think that's when Lee Greenwood was debuting Proud to Be an American. And Tracy, oh my God, he was on a horse and he's going down the railing of this rodeo and he's leaning over and he's kissing women full on the mouth over and over again. It was gross.
Really funny because when you were saying Lee Greenwood, I was like, Sharon, I don't know who that is. Is he a famous rodeo rider? And why would I know that? But of course, I do know the song now that you say that.
You know the song. So anyway, but we did social stuff together. And Steve also did like ministry related things with us. We know he had a connection with Keith, obviously before the crash. But in 1983, we actually asked Steve to do a photo shoot for us to be the subject in a photo shoot, to pose as a model reference for the cover art of an upcoming Last Days magazine issue. The lead article for that magazine was called The Father Heart of God. And at the time, the artwork, I mean, it was just heartwarming.
Heartwarming?
Heartwarming.
That's what it sounded like you said. We can cut that.
No, heartwarming. Yes, there's a worm in that heart for sure. But it was Steve with one of his young sons, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah. And, for those who followed us, they'll totally know that the Father Heart of God issue was groundbreaking for us because we were such the holiness, dig your sin out, break up the fallow ground. And so this was like one of the more positive messages that came out of like, hey, God just wants to be your father. We didn't go as far as saying Papa God. That's a new creation.
Oh my God. There's my barf bag. Where's my barf bag? Daddy Papa.
And so this was a really special episode for a lot of us because in those openness and brokenness sessions in our ICT, this would often be a catalyst of just that healing that would come after you've done all that hard work. And so yeah, and I had forgotten about that until we were talking about this in preparation for that. I was like, oh my God, I forgot that is him. And so we will definitely post it. And of course, the artwork's beautiful because we had very talented artists. And he's holding his young son, just gentle, loving embrace. And it's the contradiction that he would eventually show up to pay to have sex, or as you say, rape a 14-year-old girl, especially as that's the message that's kind of capturing that image. It's heartbreaking. And I can't see that apart from that little son now who has had to grow up and have this be his father's legacy, right? It's like it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy all around.
It's unimaginable. It's unimaginable. Yeah. And I was also thinking back on the sort of advisory role that he played in the crisis that was happening in 1986. And that's towards the end of our era number 2 in the demise of I should say it right. The demise of Last Days Ministries.
Hey, that sounded like you actually had some reverb going on. Good job. And of course, I know that people won't believe us when we say that, but we will be covering that era in the not too distant future.
Yes, we will. But is it kind of funny how the future keeps on slipping forward in time? It's like Steve's situation has pretty much hijacked our original schedule. So
yeah, but we want to remind listeners why this has a connection to that bridge, right? Because of his Christian pedigree and the whole first love and the whole Jesus movement and everything that led up to that. So that's why we have given ourselves permission to do a little tangent on this, because it does dovetail so much into the forming of Last Days, who we became, what we believed, and then of course this story here.
Right.
And I would just say that we're also really set up as Christians to, Jesus was always coming soon, and Jesus movement particularly, we believed it was going to be in the 1980s, and here we are in motherfucking 2024, and Jesus still hasn't come. So our episode will come before Jesus comes.
All these sexual predators are. They're coming.
They are coming.
Oh, God. All right. Back to let's go back in time again. Let's go back. All right. So we, and I'm meaning right now, me and my former husband, Martin, in our leadership roles at Last Days, we actually, there was a time we confided and consulted with Steve and Nelly. And this is when we had these huge concerns about Melody Green, Keith's widow, because she had this growing, this ambition. It was just so ego driven. She had this determination. She wanted to record her own album. She wanted to go on a concert tour. And this was despite the fact that everyone in leadership and everyone on staff at Last Days was like, this is a horrible idea. It has nothing to do with God. It's all about Melody's ego and ambition. But Melody just would not listen to us.
Yeah. And I just want to add this in that, because as we have kind of, or at least as I have gone and listened to several of Steve Greisen's interviews, in those days before Keith Green had his first album, it was a freaking music mecca. I mean, you had the most amazing talent coming out of that time, including Bob Dylan, right? And so second chapter of Acts, Buck Herring, Steve Greisen, they were at the helm of some, whatever you think about the lyrics and the music, some really good music.
Oh, it's incredible, incredible music,
and
right?
So yes. And so now we hear Melody singing and wanting to follow in those footsteps. And I mean, even now, if I put a second chapter of Acts album on, it's just amazingly talented and good.
It is.
Matthew Ward's voice is like, oh, it just transports you. I could get saved just listening to their music.
I could too.
So they really knew their stuff. Just putting that point on it. So so as you're seeking their counsel, they would be like, no,
right,
no, this is not a good move.
Yeah, and I don't remember if we brought Buck and Annie and Matthew. I don't know if we were actually like talking privately with them as well, but I definitely remember talking with Steve and Nelly and them being extremely helpful and upfront. And they're, confirming absolutely Melody is not recording and touring material. Yeah, the songs she's written, they're not that good. She couldn't even stay on pitch while trying to sing them. And I also remember Steve and Nelly being very compassionate and insightful. And they really did help us navigate having to confront Melody on this.
Yeah. And I think this is another side note, but I can't imagine the not little bit of hubris, but the hubris. Like if I had to sing in front of Matthew, Nelly, and Annie, I would be trembling.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, I'm like, whoa.
What? I'm not even going to call that hubris. I'm calling that delusion.
Delusion. It's like, that would be rough.
Yeah. Well, and she did.
Well, and if listeners who are not from our circles and they just found us, we will put links. And you have to go hear who we're talking about. And no matter what your belief system, you're like, they're damn talented.
They're incredible. They're incredible.
And of course, we know this about Melody because she did a concert for us all at Last Days. And I'm not a musical producer, Sharon. I actually would consider myself very low talent when it comes to that. And I was like, my eyes were growing big. Like, this is terrible. And I remember looking across because I think there was like nudging, and we were really trained people to not speak against our elders. And so it was like, what do we do? What do we say? And I think I remember looking across the room, and I can't remember, was it Steve and Nelly who were there, or were the whole second chapter there?
Oh, Steve and Nelly were definitely there. And I'm 99% sure Annie and Buck were there, and Matt and Deanne Ward. And I think there were also some other music ministry people from the area, right? There were several. And like, holy shit.
Yeah. And I do remember that. And I know I had at least one conversation afterwards, even though I tried to, be loyal. But it was that thing where you're kind of looking at the other person. It's the Emperor's New Clothes, Sharon. That's a perfect analogy. Because it's like, who's going to tell her?
oh my God. It was embarrassing.
It was embarrassing, but I think we were more embarrassed for her than she was for herself.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. It was fun going down memory lane that way. All right. Let's fast forward again some years later. And this is after Martin and I have been kicked out of Last Days. And we're living in Richmond, Virginia. And I'm thinking it was like 92, 93, maybe later. But anyway, Steve came to visit us. I think Nelly was with him, but I'm pretty sure she was. And he did come through at least once, I think maybe another time or two. And in retrospect, Tracy, as I've thought about this, I'm like, maybe this is just one little teeny puzzle piece in this whole overall topic, because his primary reason for coming to see us was to try to recruit Martin and me into what was called Melaleuca.
No!
So Yes,
Oh.
I'm embarrassed. Okay, wait. So this was a multi-level marketing company that Steve had gotten involved with. And I think it was kind of on the ground floor. Like he was super high up this pyramid thing with a big downline. And he's showing us that he's already making thousands of dollars a month. So we'll have to talk about that later. That may be a whole other thing.
We will have to talk about that later. And I will put a post up at some point. If you were ever recruited into Melaleuca during this time, we're going to ask you to like a post because
oh my God,
it made its way. And I have Melaleuca stories and very, very embarrassing. And I did not know that Steve Greisen was your hook. I think you may have been a hook to someone in Pennsylvania who was trying to recruit us.
I'm so embarrassed now.
And I haven't yelled at you for that. So
okay, we're going to have a whole other.
Get back to that.
We'll have a whole MLM issue or episode or something. So okay, all right. So fast forward again to I think it was early 2006. So by then, my marriage to Martin was over and Dave and I were together at that point.
Okay, but wait. Did you make millions of dollars with Melaleuca by this time?
Fuck no.
Oh, okay.
But
spoiler alert.
I had shits of those fucking gold bars. And okay, this is another thing we're going to talk about. Not now. All right. So anyway, back to this part. In 2006, we meaning me and Dave, we went to Colorado Springs for the Last Days Ministries reunion they were having there.
I did not go to that reunion.
I know.
I did not. And I'm trying to think of why I didn't. But I think we'd mentioned this before, listeners. Since the demise of Last Days Ministries, there have been several reunions at different locations throughout the country. And one was in Colorado Springs. And Sharon, I think in a hussy outfit, if I can recall, brought her adulteress, because you can only be married once in the Lord, right? So even if you were married, it's still adultery.
I was divorced.
But it's still adultery in the eyes of God, is my point.
Okay, you're right. It was still adultery.
Into that group, yes.
I did. And, okay, well, we weren't living in sin as in living together. But
so
we were,
you say.
But we were definitely enjoying carnal pleasures.
Oh.
Definitely. And, okay, wait. Psst. Quick little aside. Everybody, purity culture lied to us.
Yes, we have a whole series on that. And I do think there is a picture. So one of my children attended that reunion, being brought to it by his father.
Kidding.
No.
I did not.
And
what?
So I heard stories from him. Absolutely stories from him on the judgment that was happening by the kids in the group. The kids in the group were judging you. That's how pervasive it is. We'll go down that rabbit hole a little bit more, but I do recall seeing pictures of your plunging neckline. That's what,
baby.
That's what's in my mind from that. So,
oh yeah, baby. This is my first set of twins, and I was going to prop them out there for everybody to see.
All right. Okay. So I will find a picture and post that so people can know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, I brought my amazing honey man and I proudly displayed him for everybody. And something that still makes me laugh, Tracy, is our dearest Betty Daffin, who is now she's 90-something years old.
Yeah, we posted pictures on our trip back
I know.
to the property. That was such a joy.
So she pulled me aside. So she's like 30-some years older than me. She pulls me aside and says something like, "Oh, sweetie, you have really traded up."
That's awesome. And she was probably the only kind voices because, like I said, the kids were talking about you. It's bad guys when the kids are talking.
Oh, I can't wait to hear more. Okay. All right. We're rambling. Okay, on that same Colorado trip, because I got to bring this back, right? Why are we even talking about this?
That Colorado, yes.
That same Colorado trip, after the Last Days reunion, Dave and I went to go visit Steve and Nelly in their home in Monument, and that's about 30 minutes north of Colorado Springs. So then they just spontaneously invite us to head up into the Rocky Mountains with them, up at 10,000 feet and stay a couple of days in this gorgeous mountain retreat lodge they'd built. And we did, and it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And I have this vivid memory of Nelly cooking the most delicious roasted vegetables with herbe de Provence seasoning. And I didn't even know what it was. I mean, it was just delicious. And I'm like, what is this? What is this?
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it like it was yesterday being there with them.
Do you have any photos of that time? Do you remember?
I have looked and I cannot find them. I'm sure we took some, but I just can't find them. Yeah. So Dave and I went back again to Colorado a couple times after that, and we visited Steve and Nelly. They graciously again hosted us up at their mountain lodge. They even let us stay there on our own once.
Oh, wow.
And
oh, that's nice.
It was. And we totally fell in love with the beauty and the wildness of that part of Colorado. Like I said, I mean, it's this up at 10,000 feet, and you're surrounded by these snow-capped mountains that are even taller, and there's elk and pronghorn. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And we were so in love with it that we started talking about maybe buying some land right there near Steve and Nelly's place. And Steve telling us about various properties that are available. He's kind of helping guide us. And then when we were getting serious about it, like, okay, yeah, maybe we really will do this and buy a few acres. That's actually part of what led Dave and I to think about actually getting married.
Oh, wow.
Because we figured it would be easier to own property together that way. Because before that, I was like, nah, I don't need to get married. I'm fine to be in a long-term committed relationship, but no interest in marriage.
Well, that's really interesting. And I'll put a link in the show notes, but Keith Green had an influence on Steve and Nelly getting married. And then Steve and Nelly had an influence on you and Dave getting married. So kind of a loop there.
Oh, wow. Look at all this triangulation.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, they've been a part of my life for over 40 years.
Yeah, I don't think I realized all that about Colorado.
Yeah.
And did you have any red flags at all in those Colorado memories besides the MLM, which is its own different category?
There was one slight thing, and we'll get to that later. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah. It was really just more a question in my mind about how he was interacting with a young woman that worked for him in the film company or something. So anyway. Okay. So as I said, Tracy, doing the research and thinking about all this and all this darkness, it actually brought to my mind, I remembered one other time that I was personally affected by something similar. So this was in 2013 when I learned about a clergy sexual abuse that had happened in the 1990s at our church in Richmond, Virginia. But that didn't come to light until 15 or so years after the fact. And it didn't have nearly the emotional impact on me as this Steve Greisen situation. About that one. So back in the 90s, during my first marriage, and while I was still struggling, trying to be a good Christian, we were members of a modest-sized church called Trinity Assembly of God. And the pastor was Lowell Qualls, and the youth pastor was Troy Mitten. Now, hey, another little aside, Tracy, remember when we had the Last Days Ministries reunion in Richmond?
Yes.
That's the church.
Yes,
we did it there at that church. Right.
I vividly remember that, yes.
All right. So in 2013, news broke of Troy Mitten's previous sexual abuse of teens in the youth group way back then. And according to the newspaper, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, on August 15th, 2014, he pled no contest to, they called it, quote, indecent liberties.
With isn't that a euphemism? Indecent liberties.
Liberties. With two teenage girls in the 1990s. And that's the time frame that, again, we were members there. So Troy was sentenced to 10 years with 7 of those years suspended. So 3 years.
So he did prison time?
He did prison time. Yep. 3
For
years.
Indecent liberties?
Yep. In actual prison.
Wow.
So the article also states that the 2 women who at the time of the article were now 32 and 35 testified about what he had done. The victims were parishioners of the now defunct Trinity Assembly of God, where Mitten served as youth minister. The women testified Thursday that they once viewed Mitten as a father figure. They said the sexual contact began after Mitten gained their trust and affection. Now, Tracy, when this news hit, I immediately recalled having had a vague feeling all those years ago that Troy Mitten seemed rather chummy, like almost flirty with this one particular tall, beautiful blonde teenager who sang on the worship team. But I know what I did. I questioned myself for being suspicious and judgmental, right? Because it's like, oh no, that can't be true. Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's all okay. I did that.
Yes. And I don't think we realized at that time like we do now, because we were conditioned. These are leaders, right?
Right.
You hope the best. You believe the best. You don't bring accusations against the brethren. So
Right. And I am so thankful that these 2 women later came forward to testify. And I also wonder, were there other victims? And the other thing I wonder, Tracy, that I think about now is if the senior pastor, Lowell Qualls, did he have any sort of inkling, any suspicions? And if so, how and why did he shove those aside? And if not, why the fuck not? I mean, I can't believe that Lowell never saw anything.
Never saw anything, especially if you already had, some indicators.
Yeah. And I'm just there, at service or a little bit after service. And Lowell's there. This guy is on staff. And like, why? I mean, there had to have been some knowledge, some suspicion. No doubt about it. And how about Troy's wife? Now, of course, she's a victim in this too, but did she suspect anything? And as we dig deeper, Tracy, into this, like, what's the problem? I think part of the problem is you see little red flags, you might have suspicions, and you shove them down and don't say anything.
Shove them down. Yes. And I think that's one of the main reasons we were trying to talk about this is to get those red flags more out into the open so that we can say something, talk to somebody about that. Because, even in the wives in these situations, there's so much conditioning on submission, being faithful, being loyal, trusting God, don't call them out. And if they did have red flags, how much are they suppressing that within themselves? Because it's really hard to face, right?
Right.
Who wants to believe this? And sometimes it's easier to turn away.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm just thinking with Lowell Qualls, the senior pastor, it's like, whoa, if there is a problem, this is gonna shock the ministry, and you're gonna lose parishioners, and you're gonna lose money. So there's that whole thing of just got to keep God's work going.
Yes,
right.
And that's what we've seen in IHOP KC and a lot of these big high profile ministries. Yes, they want to hush hush because they do not want to expose their feet of clay, which is going to dry up donations ultimately.
Right.
I do have a question as far as I know that this situation with Trinity was very difficult, but you said it didn't hit you nearly like the Stephen Nelly Greisen story.
Yeah.
Do you think because of our elitism, we kind of put Christians in different categories too? And I know we struggled going to churches after last days because they never were all quite as sold out as we were. They were never quite as learned as we were, And so our expectations may have been a little bit less. And with Steve Greisen, we know his pedigree and we know his circles. And do you think that had any part in it?
It might have, But I think it's really just more because, Troy was just a staff person. And I really didn't have, I might have had 2 or 3 passing conversations with him over the years. I really didn't know the man. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably more about that because, I can read, like we heard about this pastor who was released on bond yesterday and committed suicide today. And that's just a name and a headline.
Correct.
Troy was a little closer, and
Mm-hmm.
what I really felt was for the one teenage girl that I knew.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my God, it was happening." And I
Yes.
felt like I just felt like some of us should have known. We should have been able to do something to help her. But
Wow. Yeah. And, I do want to also call out to our listeners that this situation is still a bit different than, of course, the crime of Steve Greisen.
right.
Troy's sexual victims were teenagers in his youth group, which follows the classic pattern of he has a position of trust and authority over them. He's
Mhm.
allowing himself into their lives. He's manipulating their vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
Classic grooming, which is
Right.
why I kind of agree with you. How can a pastor not see something going on? And of course, Steve's crime, which I don't know that we've fully explained, which we're going to get to, at least the one that we know of in this particular crime, he was willing to pay to sexually abuse a complete stranger. He didn't have a relationship with this would-be 14-year-old child. And he was going through basically not even a pimp, but a third party to get to this girl.
Mhm.
So in order to victimize that innocent one. So it's a little different.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if one's worse than the other. It's just
Oh,
awful.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess that, the ones where the grooming is taking place, that's the part where we have to make a culture where the red flags are
Right.
easier to raise and that people can investigate them and do things about them.
You're right. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit, Tracy. You know, one more. And I think I might have mentioned this in the purity culture thing.
Mm-hmm.
My high school choir director, I was 16. I just graduated from Tucson High. He showed up to my house. He's a little drunk
So
and he's
crazy.
groping. He's grabbing my breasts and he's kissing me and shoving his tongue down my mouth, completely uninvited. So in his case, this was, again, underage sexual assault. He was exploiting my trust and his position of authority, but there wasn't the religious thing involved on his end at all.
Yeah, and it's good for you that you resisted that, and that is, it just blows my mind that that happens. And then when you layer on, if it were a religious aspect to it, it is a whole other kind of layer of evil
Yeah.
because there's that spiritual manipulation, right? That
Yes.
you can coerce on a deeper level of, don't you want to be closer to God? Whatever it is that they use.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, all sinister, absolutely all sinister.
Yep. While we're here, hey, Dr. J. Edmund Hughes, if you're still out there anywhere,
Good memory.
I know that you did this to 2 other teenage
Oh,
classmates that were like the
Sharon.
years above me. And I'm like, just a fucking little dickhead. Drove around in his 240Z, all hot shit. Who does that? Who trolls teenage girls?
Yeah.
Like just a
and
loser.
someone should know. So to that
Someone should have
point,
known.
yeah,
Yeah.
religious circles have a responsibility, but so do trusted schools and secular environments.
They do.
When you have that many red flags, that's
Yeah. I don't have the emotional energy to really go try to track him down. Last I looked, though, a while back, he was still affiliated with the University of Puget Sound in Washington State.
Shout out to Washington State if you know this person.
You know what? Now that I'm saying all this, I don't know. I think maybe I need to think about doing something because you know what? As Steve's crime, because here's the crazy thing. I'm thinking to myself, this was in the 70s. This guy is got to be like at least 10 years older than me. So he's now in his 70s or so. And I'm thinking, oh, he's so old, he wouldn't do it again. But Steve did this at age 68. So maybe they don't grow out of it. So I got to think about that. Maybe I'll have to.
Or maybe they get worse because it does seem, we don't know if that's just the reporting time frame that things are coming to light. But, even when I read the age of Steve Greisen, my first thought was like, oh, that's so old. And I'm like, oh, that's not too much older than I am because it...
Right.
Yes. And it's like, oh, God.
Oh, my God.
And so I don't know, what's happening or what's going on with that. But
right.
I don't think they grow out of it. I think they get savvier or more desperate. I don't know.
So Tracy, I've never asked you this before. Have you ever personally known someone who was either a victim of or a predator abuser in an underage sex crime?
I don't think I know anyone like in relationship. I will say that when we were doing the summer camps at Last Days Ministries, and for those who didn't know, we offered every year in July a 1 week summer camp, which was like a mini ICT. And there was...
This is for high school kids because it wasn't good enough wasn't good enough to try to indoctrinate 17 and 18-year-olds. We needed to get them younger. We did have air conditioning. So for all of those teen mania people out there who had a terrible summer camp without air conditioning, we at least gave air conditioning. But we had a concert, and I don't know what song triggered it, but it was just this... weeping broke out. And in my particular group, there was countless story after story after story of these young teenage girls who had been sexually molested. And the majority of those, and they say, were by people and these were a lot uncles and grandfathers and stepfathers. So much so that it put me, when I started having children, I basically was suspicious first and they had to prove they're innocent. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a way to be, but I had heard so many stories over those years that I was very cautious. Wow, Tracy. Wow. All right. Okay, I don't know how long we've been going here, but I think it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty details of what happened in Steve Greisen's criminal case.
Yeah, because I think when we did our last episode, we were still waiting on some confirmation from the actual documents. And so Sharon, she should be doing this part-time, being one of those crime busters. You got a hold of them.
I did. I contacted the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. That's El Paso County, Colorado.
Yes, because I'm from El Paso, Texas. And when I first read that, I was like, wait, they went across state lines. They went from Colorado to Texas. And you're like, no, El Paso County in Colorado.
County, right. And then the Colorado Springs Court. And I requested all of the publicly available records. So we are going to be quoting directly from that documentation and their website. Take it away, Tracy.
Yes. So in the summer of 2022, there was a proactive operation, and here's the description directly from their website. Quote, the Colorado Springs Police Department and El Paso County Sheriff's Office Joint Internet Crimes Against Children Unit, along with the Homeland Security Investigation, has concluded a summer-long collaborative effort to identify and arrest child sexual predators. The undercover operation resulted in 12 individuals arrested who all reside within El Paso County. Charges include internet luring of a child, sexual exploitation of a child, attempted sexual assault on a child, and soliciting for child prostitution.
So in this proactive anti-predator operation, the task force placed an advertisement on a website specifically for escort services. The title of the ad was, quote, and this is all lowercase, Lil Princess Coming Through Town, end quote. And coming is spelled Cuming.
Cue the barf bag.
Yeah. The ad included a photo of a Homeland Security confidential informant depicting a girl who looks to be under the age of 18 with her face obscured. The text of the ad read, quote, Lil Princess looking for a prince, and the 4 is the numeral. Fun, fresh, and ready to play. The 2 is a numeral also. Only in town for a few days. Text for details, end quote. And then it gave a local Colorado Springs phone number.
The ad also listed various services which were available. And some of these included intercourse - anal, which they then code as Greek, in parentheses, intercourse - vaginal, which they code as, in parentheses, FS, capital F, capital S, oral - receiving, which they code in parentheses as capital DATY, and then oral - without a condom, which they code in parentheses as BBBJ, all capital letters.
Right. So there's the slang and these code abbreviations in the ad. The letter FS stands for full sex. The letters DATY, so I had to look that up, Tracy. It means dining at the Y. Doesn't that sound so sophisticated?
That's so disgusting. God.
Don't get me wrong, folks. I'm not against oral sex. It's just in the context of this ad.
It's so disgusting.
And a 14-year-old.
Yeah, this is so, it's so. So yeah, so listeners, before we weren't sure when we were talking with Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott, if he had, been, conversing with a youth and getting off on that and then meeting, or if he was going through an ad. And so we did find this is going through an ad. And this was kind of the shocking stuff that we were reading.
Right. So, and that last one in that list, the BB stands for bareback, which means without a condom. And it's important to know this because it's going to come up.
Yes, and it is going to. And so obviously, personally, this is my first time reading anything even like this, right? And like you said, you had to look stuff up. So it's very hard for me to believe that somebody who is going through with this is not somewhat schooled in how all this works, because this is definitely coded and horrifying. So keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that. And, this ad specifically does not state that the girl is a minor. And of course, we think we know because there's AI looking all over for these types of things to arrest people. And of course, that would be obviously illegal and there would be huge red flags. And so I still don't know how this is not illegal also. But what the ad does do is it uses slang and innuendo to get the point across. Lil Princess. I hate this. This really makes me. I know,
you got to read it, though. Read it.
I know. Quote, fun, fresh, and ready to play, end quote. And of course, the photo image intentionally shows a very young teen. It seems these are the types of things commonly done to attract customers who want underage merchandise without officially having to say they are underage. Some of my research, I heard that these were really popular in areas where big games are coming through, or there's a reason that crowds are gathering, and that this is something that's a lot on people's radar to go find this in those. So,
oh God.
There's definitely knowledge that these ads are out there and what to look for.
Right. And that's the point, that they're trying to draw out predators who want to engage with children and minors. So they're following along with how this black market operates and promotes. And Tracy, you just said a moment ago about the research and finding out people travel with, games and things that are happening. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's going to come up later, but Steve's really proud of all his travel, national and international. And oh God, my skin is crawling.
Especially, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So continuing, on September 7th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m., Steve sent his first text to the phone number in the ad. The person on the other end was a detective from the task force posing as a woman selling sexual access to her 14-year-old daughter, which is horrifying enough, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, Steve and this woman supposedly selling her 14-year-old daughter exchanged texts over the course of the next half hour. So Sharon suggested that we use AI as a part of the voice to text to be able to share this with everybody. And at first I was like, do I really want to hear this? But I think, Sharon, you did a phenomenal job because it really does read like voice to text would read. There are a few places where the texts use abbreviations, but we've ended up stating the full words just so it's easier for you to follow. And so these were by text, but imagine this is voice to text so that you can hear it.
Are you available for a call now?
Hi. My girl will be available today after 6. She is 14 and ready to play. Rates are $150 for half hour and $200 for hour. Hit me up if interested.
Pick?
You first, so I know you aren't police.
Are you police?
Why would I say you're police if I was?
Just say.
Pick or nah.
Don't have time for games. Are you police?
Not a cop. You?
Not a cop.
Cool. What are you looking for?
Your pick. Half hour. I can meet at 6 p.m.
What service? 6 o'clock is good. Bareback is a little extra.
Okay. How much extra?
You want bareback Greek or bareback full sex?
Full sex.
$170. Okay, no condom, full sex. 14 female, $170. We are downtown.
Okay. I can be there in 20 minutes.
How far are you from downtown? Okay, text at Plattenwasach, and I'll give you the address. We are in a rental condo. You there?
Almost.
Okay, address is... It'll show as a bank, but we're staying in one of the apartments on the top floor.
Okay.
I'm outside waiting for you. Jeans and white tank. Park in the back parking lot. That's where I'm at.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
and listeners, I do just want to punctuate, just to let you guys kind of in on, she was like, Sharon was, I'm going to do AI. I'm like, this wasn't a phone call. I really don't want to be salacious. But I think this does a superb job of really capturing how the text exchange went.
Yeah.
And heart-wrenching. I mean, just like...
Yeah, like what was actually happening? Like what was actually fucking happening? And it's just, it's so disturbing, so creepy, so horrible. And, we talked about how when we first saw the mugshot and read the headline, that we first thought was a hoax, it was just surreal, right? Like when we realized it was real, it's like, this is surreal. This just can't even be. And when I got the investigation case documents and I read that text exchange, I felt this other wave of just surreal shock, right? Of like, whoa. But then Tracy, after putting together the AI, running this through the AI voice program and now hearing it, I mean, it just brings home this horrific reality all the more because I can picture him doing it in real time. I know him. I've had conversations with him. I know what his, you know what I mean? I know what his face looks like. I know what his voice looks like. I can see him doing this. And it's just, it's, I don't know. It's just crazy.
Yeah. And it's so cavalier and it's so, one of my first thoughts were, if this were the first time.
Right.
I don't know how many times people try this and then back out, but this is just so efficient.
Yes.
I mean, I hate to use that word, but it's so efficient of like, it's taking place within a fucking half hour.
Right.
And he is on the road. And
yeah.
It's really hard for me to comprehend that this is the first time.
Yeah. And listeners, in case all of the slime was just overwhelming you too as you listened, I want to point out that Steve was asking for vaginal sex without a condom with a 14-year-old child, which means that in addition to everything else, he's also willing to bring home an STI or HIV to his wife, right?
Yeah. And I know I'm going to probably keep saying this over and over again because all of this is so horrible, but this is from a man who sits at the head of multiple ministries.
Yeah.
Whose function is to help save children from this. And he is talking to what he thinks is a mother selling her child to him. And it's staggering on another level, just staggering on another level. All right. So continuing, the case file states that Steve arrived at the given address at approximately 6:05 p.m.
Right. So here's where I was curious, like, what else is new, right? And remember, I've been to their home. They're in Monument. So I Google mapped it, and it takes about 30 minutes to drive from Steve's house to this sting address. And the texting started at 5:30 p.m. It was at 5:38 p.m. that he said he could be there by 6. And we don't know, of course, whether he was coming from his house or somewhere else in the Colorado Springs area. And the other thing, Tracy, it also occurred to me, he would have needed to have some sort of cover story to tell Nelly, what was he doing for those 90-ish minutes while he was getting his rocks off. But, maybe he's just running errands.
He could have been working late. He could have been doing all kinds of things. That's why I'm saying just to be able to, get this, answer this, get the money and get there. It's like, damn, I can't get to the fucking grocery store with this much intensity.
Oh, my God.
So here are some more details from the case file. When Greisen arrived, he met with a female undercover detective posing as the woman from the text conversation. It gets me angry just thinking about this. She told him that her daughter was on the 4th floor of the building, and he said he would pay her once they got upstairs together. Greisen asked her to delete all the messages she had from him on her cellular phone as they walked toward the building.
Yep. Smart that way.
Right.
Cover the tracks.
Hey, let's cover these tracks, which is why you could trust these people anyway is another thing beyond me. Right. My first thought would be, of course, they could use this as blackmail further down the road.
Yeah.
Stupid that he didn't use a burner phone also. Side note.
Yeah. All right. But he's going to try to destroy the evidence, which again kind of says he's probably thought about this before.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. He was then arrested by several members of the investigative team without incident and taken to a holding cell on the 2nd floor. He had $180 cash at the time. He was charged with multiple felonies and then released on $35,000 bond.
All right. So let's pause for a moment and summarize what this is and what it isn't, and remind ourselves and listeners of the things that we learned from Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott in our last episode. Steve Greisen falls into the predator category of a buyer. He was willing to pay for sexual access to a 14-year-old minor. And also because it's, not just doing it online, it is classified as a contact crime.
Yeah, and most people, including you and me, before we learned better, would have labeled him a pedophile. That's the thing that people are going to say, oh, another pedo, right, in these circles. But this crime is not an indication of actual pedophilia, as we learned by the clinical definition from Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. The term pedophile refers to a person with a strong sexual arousal to prepubescent children, which they've determined is about the age of 10 and under.
Mm-hmm.
Being a pedophile is not synonymous with being a child molester or a sexual predator. There are some people who wrestle with pedophilia who will never, ever offend or touch a child. And there are also those predators who sexually abuse children, but who would not be diagnostically classified as having pedophilia.
Right, right. I guess they're just happy to stick their dicks wherever they can, huh?
Mm.
In Steve's case, the more relevant term we learned from the good doctors is hebephilia, which refers to someone with strong sexual attraction to early pubescent children, typically 11 to 14 years old. And again, having this sexual attraction and arousal is not necessarily the same as acting out on it. It's not the same as becoming an abuser. However, Steve was paying to fuck a 14-year-old child, so that would seem to indicate he may have had some level of attraction to that specific age group.
Yeah, and at least he didn't slam on the brakes and say, wait, 14 years old? Because I think someone had mentioned to us of like, well, maybe he at first really thought it was still a 19-year-old. And it's like, no, it was very
Right.
clearly spelled out that it was 14. The ad is talking about Little Princess, so I think it's already setting the stage for that.
Yeah.
And he didn't stop. He didn't say,
No.
wait, that's a child. He was not only ready, I mean, I say with the timeline, he was very eager to go forward and pay his money and do this deed.
He's probably driving with a heart on in his pants the whole
It's
time.
just so
Shit.
And so this is what we know and what was reported in the official documents of this particular crime. And Sharon, I don't even think I told you this, but when you first sent it, I couldn't open up the second document because it was on my phone. And so I first just got the general report. And I was like, okay, that's the general report. I mean, it's horrifying. And I thought, sometimes an attachment looks like it's two attachments, but it's really one. And then when I later got on, because when you were talking about the AI and I opened that, I was like, oh my God.
Right.
So good job getting this. And you and I have discussed that there might be a much bigger iceberg under this terrible surface.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because, I mean, I said it before, it's almost insane to think that Steve, or anyone for that matter, would go from 0 to a zillion in one step. And you've pointed out, these little clues that, yeah, this guy's probably done something before. He's so familiar with it. He's so efficient. And I think that chances are there has been a history of other stuff for quite some time and maybe for years. Now, an immediate question in my mind was, had he been searching out child sexual abuse images online? And I mentioned that when we were talking with Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott. So in the time since we recorded that episode and, in my trying to uncover every stone, I made half a dozen calls to various departments, the task force and Colorado Springs Police, the El Paso County Sheriff, I just called a whole bunch of places. What I was able to confirm is that there was no search conducted of Steve's computers or phones to look for child sexual abuse images. And that honestly, Tracy, I mean, that shocked me.
Yeah, shocks me too. When you have all this money going into a task force and then you don't go further to make sure you root it all out.
I mean, here you've got this guy. He's responded to your online ad. He's ready to physically abuse a 14-year-old. I mean, my God, why the fuck wouldn't they ask a judge for a search warrant to check his devices?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. And I would think that, I don't know what kind of part we can play in the justice system to have, better laws and better criminality of things like this. But the bottom line is we don't have any direct knowledge of any additional internet or any personal offenses.
Right.
But I think we use our brains and say, you just don't stumble across this little ad and within a half an hour, you're already there for a 14-year-old without there being
something,
some conditioning. Yeah. That's making you want,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just hard to keep saying. But on September 7th, we know that date in 2022, not only did he commit a sexual predator crime, but he betrayed his wife and his community and his children.
Yeah.
And embarrassingly, right?
Oh,
like
my God.
staggeringly shameful to have it be this. And, there's a lot we can say on that.
Yeah, there is. And just as far as the betrayal of Nelly, I mean, I have seen both sides of infidelity, and the trauma of the betrayed partner, it's almost indescribable. I mean, it's complex, it's right up there with PTSD. I mean, it's horrific. And again, if we can reasonably assume that he did not go from 0 to a zillion in one step, that would mean there have most likely been other infidelities and possible outright betrayals in his past.
Yeah. And of course, this is only conjecture on our part,
right.
But, we talk about in the days when people just had affairs, right? And it's like,
right.
I'm sure there was access to affairs, which is its own terrible kind of betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are basically dealing with a woman that you believe is selling her child, that is a betrayal that I think is why it hit us so hard. This is really hard to fathom, Sharon.
Yeah.
Of course, easier for us because there was no actual victim, right? This was a police sting. And so, of course, our hearts go out to the circle around him that is devastated by this betrayal.
Yeah. And, again, it doesn't also mean that his past may have included this as well. I mean, like, did he actually have a trafficking underage victim before? I don't know. Maybe it was just, watching adult pornography, sneaking watching it, which, and I just want to say, that would only be if the watching of it was outside the agreements with his wife, right? That it would have violated her trust in him. Because contrary to the lies that we were sold in purity culture, it is possible for there to be ways to use certain types of pornography that's made with consenting adults that are not damaging to oneself or to a relationship. But, Tracy, everyone you and I have ever known in our former Christian circles absolutely believed that viewing any form of pornography was a horrible, horrible sin. And that's most likely the case in Steve's marriage.
Yeah, and I mean that could be a whole episode on its own, because I think there is a false equivalency that a lot of Christian circles try to make that, all kinds of pornography, from looking at a naked woman, right, is going to send you down the path to like where Joss Duggar ended up. And it's like, that's not true. That's why we brought Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott on to show that there is a very big difference there.
Well, also, I want to say the other thing too is when you start to say false equivalency, the whole scripture, right? Jesus says, if you look at a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery. So there's part of this is a whitewashing of like, oh, well, looking with lust or actually committing adultery, see, it's all the same.
Correct.
And that's another way they minimize this shit.
Yes. And that's why most of us, when we see this whole series of events that Steve committed, it's jaw-dropping in comparison to, okay, you've been unfaithful before. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But to actually commit a crime, right? There's no crime against having an affair. It breaks your vows, it breaks your community, breaks your family. It's all terrible. But I mean, this is next level. You've gone into sex trafficking. This is really, really difficult, particularly coming from the faith community. And, the whole, idea of what he could have possibly done leading to this crime. Of course, my viewpoint is this sexual repression that we've all been under, and if, he did, probably not if, he did marry young, and at what point you start to get older and feel that you are tired of repressing all of your sexuality. And this whole idea of purity. And I think it was really interesting that Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott mentioned that without, I don't think, realizing how much it was going to tie into our own community, right? Of like, hey, for the lack of a better word, they use that pure. And I'm like, there is something I think that gets arrested in our development that is attracted to that stage.
Right. Pure.
That seems to be so, at least what they think, that seems to be so prevalent in these circles.
Right. All right. So, yeah, he could have engaged in an affair with a consenting adult. Could there have been grooming of employees or subordinates? Was he viewing child sexual abuse images on his devices? We don't know because, they didn't do a search. Did he do any grooming of minors? Again, we don't know. We think he did something, but we don't know what it would have been.
Yeah, and we did circle back with Dr. Shiloh just to ask some questions and confirm some statistics that she shared. So for solicitation offenders, and remember, listeners, we didn't know that was his particular crime when we did that recording, which we mentioned, also known as buyers.
Well, wait, we did know that was his crime. We just didn't know how he went about doing it.
Yes, we didn't know that he was soliciting it through a third party.
Right. Okay.
He could have been in conversation with. He could have found somebody that he was talking to.
Okay.
Or posing as a child and having that conversation that was, part of the thrill. I
see what you're saying. Yeah.
But, the one for solicitation offenders, also known as buyers, after getting caught and mandated to therapy, 30% admitted to committing prior contact offenses that were never known about prior to when they were arrested.
Which by being contact offenses means actual crimes,
Correct.
Right? Because if it was just, common adultery, it wouldn't have been an offense.
Correct. And 20 to 40% also had child sexual abuse images of victims aged 13 to 15 on their computers.
Yeah.
So that's why we're pretty horrified that the law did not follow through with that, because we think that's a really important step to shut down those rings, right? So it's pretty horrifying that they didn't follow through with that.
Yeah, to me too. Yeah. So it's possible that he may have had previous instances of actually buying sex from adults or trafficked minors, but he just wasn't caught. It's possible. Now, we know he knew how to cover his tracks by deleting text messages. Of course, that's not, people do that all the time. And if I had to bet, I feel it is more likely than not that he has had prior real life, in person, in the flesh indulgences of one type or another. And Tracy, I was wondering if we might someday hear of any victims coming forward. And God, I hope there are not real life victims. I hope if he did fuck around, it was, just basic affairs. But if there are minors who were preyed upon by him, I hope they will seek justice and vindication. I hope they will.
Yeah, and he might have a strange point of morality in his own head where it's like, if I pay for it, it's less worse than if I'm grooming somebody. So who knows? But yes, if there's got to have been red flags, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. But let's go back to the details of this case just to recap. There were multiple charges filed against Steve, including Class 4 felonies. Felonies, Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
So inducement of child prostitution, patronizing a prostituted child, sexual assault on a child - strong arm. Sharon, I don't know. Thought maybe I misread that at first. I don't know what that means, but it's part of the document.
Yeah, it's part of the document. I'm not sure what that meant. And I honestly didn't have time to go research it. Sorry.
Yeah. So I guess I would think that someone else is strong-arming them into the sex, so it's coercion at some point, maybe. That's my best guess. So these charges carried a possible prison sentence of up to 12 years.
Yeah.
But he did not go to prison.
No. His actual sentence, as we mentioned in the last episode, he paid court costs of about $1,700. He had a $1,500 fine, 1,000 of that was for the fact it was a sex crime, 500 because it was a crime against a child. He was sentenced to 5 years probation in the Sex Offender Intensive Supervision Program, also known as SOISP. He had to pay an initial $3,000 for that. And I don't know if there are going to be subsequent fees in the future. I don't know. I do have a link to a state website, and it details a lot about this program. And Tracy, everything I see in it indicates that he should have been sentenced to 10 years probation, but he only received half that, 5 years. And again, it's another thing. It just kind of makes me wonder why, was it like a friendly judge maybe, or was there a good Christian lawyer, who knows a good Christian prosecutor and a good Christian judge, because, we're in Colorado Springs and God, fuck, I'm sort of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but I do think that these evangelical right-wingers who are in power, they are more committed to perpetuating their push for some fucking theocracy than they are to defending the powerless.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. And we can do some research on that. But all that to say is we know that this area is a hotbed for a lot of these Christian ministries. And I think, taking the emotions out of it, Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott did say that because there wasn't a real victim and by all appearance, it was a first-time offense because there's nothing on record.
First time he was caught, just the first time he was caught.
Yes, and so that would go into the sentencing. And so
that makes sense.
And so it may be because of those that he didn't.
Right.
And they do look at your past, right? You're this upstanding supposed citizen who's done, all this stuff. And I think that definitely goes into it, even though you and I would like to make a case otherwise.
Right. Okay, the final part of his sentence, for that, he is now placed on the official Sex Offender Registry. And from what I can tell, I think it appears that this is like for life. He has to be on this registry forever, but I'm not totally certain. I do have a link to that. We'll put it in the show notes. So Tracy, I went to this site and I did a little exploring on it. And okay, I'm going to ask you to make a few guesses for us. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I searched a 5-mile radius around Steve's house. Again, remember, I've got his address. Again, that's about 30 minutes north of Colorado Springs. So it's not a super sparse, like rural area, but it's also not super dense urban either. So it gives you kind of a sense what the population density might be. In that radius, Tracy, how many registered sex offenders would you guess there to be, including Steve?
So I've had family members look in these stats when we would move into areas, and I would say it's always a little bit more than you think it is. So 12 or 13 if it's not in a real concentrated city area.
All right. The actual number is 23.
In that radius?
In that 5-mile radius. So it's about double what you thought. 23 registered sex offenders. Now, how many, if you think, okay, there's assaults against sex offenders with adults and then with children, what would you guess that ratio would be?
Probably 40% children, 60% adults.
Yeah, I kind of would have thought that too, or maybe even fewer children, more adult. The actual number is 4 adult, 19 children. That just fucking blew my mind. You still there, Tracy?
Yes. Yeah, and I didn't know if I was wanting to say this, and I don't know how many statistics are also, because you hear a lot about it in the news, that if you're 19 and you're dating a 17-year-old, you can be charged with sex offense crimes, which would be, I don't know if that would be considered minor.
Great question. You know I'm a geek for numbers and analysis. So I did go on this site and look, and I found out a few things that I think are very interesting about these 23 individuals. So let's just say this. I mean, this is just like a super small sample size, right? And by no means is this a scientific analysis or complete data, not at all. But I found it interesting, and it does give some potential indications, right? So at the risk of being accused of going down a rabbit hole, Tracy, here goes. Of these 23 individuals, 7 had committed their crimes in a different state, and then they registered when they moved to Colorado.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So then 19, those 19 crimes against minors, there's these different types of crimes that are listed. And the breakdown was 8 of these men were charged with possession of child sexual abuse images. And one of those 8 was actually also charged with intent to distribute, right? Okay, so of the 19, 8 of them, they've got child abuse images. There were 10 who were charged with assault, so physical sexual contact assault of the minor. Now, it could have been the minor, it's not like assault, like tied them up and raped them necessarily, but they were inappropriately sexually involved with the child, whether it was full-on intercourse or molestation or whatever. So that was 10 of the 19. And 3 of those 10, there's also a charge that it was from a position of trust. That's an actual quote. So I found that really interesting. So this would have been most likely, it doesn't say for sure, but I'm thinking a teacher, a pastor, a coach, something like that. And then there was only one that was charged with solicitation, and that was Steve.
Oh, wow. So
now to your question about the age at the time of the crime, the majority were in their 20s. That kind of makes sense. They're still thinking with their dicks, not with their brains. And a few were in their 30s. Only one was 19 years old. Everybody else was older.
Okay.
And Steve was by far the oldest at age 68. So I was interested, okay, what about these older offenders? What were their crimes? So on the possession of child sexual abuse images, there were 3 older men, ages 40, 52, and 60. On assault, the oldest that was charged with assaulting a child was age 54. Creepy. The oldest with an assault on adult was age 56. And then Steve, solicitation of a child, age 68.
68.
So one last thing. There was one person, only one in that group of 23, who had 2 separate crimes. He had committed an assault at age 23, and then he was caught for possession of child sexual abuse images at age 26. And I remember Shiloh talking about like a 15% recidivism after being caught the first time, that only 15% reoffend. So the greatest area for prevention, we think about why the fuck are we even doing this, is with people who have not yet committed their first crime, or maybe just not yet been caught. But like the efforts to try to prevent reoffense, like I said, out of these 23, 22 of them had not reoffended that we know of, I guess, of. So how do those numbers strike you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a concentrated city, they would seem more appropriate, but for that radius, those seem very high.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, did you say it on how many of those people went to prison? Those stats?
That's a great question. I don't know if they went straight to probation like Steve did, or if some of them went to prison first. I don't know. I'd have to go back and try to figure it out.
And I think, a lot of us, as these stories are coming out, are watching. What is the sentence like? And it's like Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott said, it's all over the board, right?
Right.
And of course, Sharon, did you want him to go to prison? I mean, knowing him personally and knowing that people we know and love will probably be listening to this, like, did you want him to go to prison?
I don't know what I wanted. I just wanted, it just seemed like, You mean it's just a slap on the wrist?
Correct.
Because you were ready to rape a 14-year-old?
Correct.
It
Correct.
doesn't seem
just.
Yeah, it doesn't. But I also know, and also, I wonder, well, what if he had a whole bunch of child sexual abuse videos on his computer? I mean, his ass would have been in prison then, but they didn't look for it.
Mhm.
So I feel kind of torn, I don't know, but it doesn't seem commensurate to the severity of what he did.
Right.
But I also know that retribution is not where it's at. It's not.
Correct. But, prison has a purpose for things other than that, right? It's to
Right.
separate predators from harming in the future or doing something, that could be so detrimental, especially when you're in trusted professional positions.
Yeah.
And so, since he didn't go to prison, what he did get is this swipes that I called it, right? And really curious on what kind of rehabilitative program that is.
Yeah. So we wanted to know more. We wanted to know more about it.
Yeah. And again, for our listeners, it's the Sex Offender Intensive Supervised Probation.
Yeah.
Probation. And it's like, what the hell does that mean, Sharon?
Right. So why don't you read this thing I sent you? This is from a website for a lawyer there in Colorado who represents people who've been convicted of sex crimes and placed in this probation program.
Yeah, so quote, Colorado's Sex Offender Intensive Supervision Program is a required intensive probation program for nonviolent, low-risk sex offenders who were not sentenced to prison. If you are subject to the SOIPs, or the SOISP, you have many obligations and severe restrictions on your rights, which I found very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Violating any of these conditions can get you sent to prison to serve out your full sentence. So that was something.
Yeah, that is. You know what? This just reminds me, though, going back to that list of the 23 offenders, that is actually the Sex Offender Registry. It doesn't state whether they're still on probation or were on probation. So the probation thing is something different. So
right, because you can go to prison and then still be on a sex registry forever. So yeah.
Right, whether you're on probation or not. So I got those two confused. Okay. So I also found a Colorado state document, official government document, that is entitled, quote, Additional Conditions of Probation for Adult Sex Offenders, end quote. And Tracy, they are pretty stringent. So I'm going to include the link. God, I hope we have enough characters available in our show notes for all of these. Yeah.
The glossary.
Oh my God. So I'm assuming Steve is required to abide by them all, but I guess I don't really know for sure. So here are some of the conditions while he is in this intensive probation program. 1, annually on his birthday, he has to renew registration as a sex offender every year. He had to give a DNA sample to be analyzed and kept on file with the state. He has to get prior permission for moving, and he'd have to notify of an address change within 5 days of moving. Here's one that was like, wow. He can have no contact with any child under 18, including his own children. Of course, they're older, but grandchildren, relatives, no child under 18, unless he is granted specific written permission in advance by a probation officer.
Wow.
And contact is defined as including not only in person, but phone calls, mail, email, text, all of it. Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. Which, I have to say, if you're convicted of a sexual offense against a minor, yeah, you shouldn't be able to. So
wow.
He also can't go anywhere near schools, parks, playgrounds, pools, any places where children are. And he must actively participate in the sex offender evaluation and treatment, but we don't know what that treatment consists of. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, and that's what we had asked Dr. Scott and Shiloh how successful it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are much more severe conditions than I expected, Sharon.
Right.
And I
Intense.
think because I knew about the Sex Offender Registry, that was kind of the main one. So
Yeah.
it's taken me a minute to let that sink in, especially you and I, we're grandparents now, right? This should be the
Right.
time when you're entering into that phase. And I don't know if their kids have kids, but I know they have nieces and nephews. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tragedy.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple more of them. He cannot purchase, possess, or consume alcoholic beverages while on probation.
Well, and I don't think we mentioned at this point, our next one we will get to, but he was a big part of the Holy Smokes men's group. And one of their icons is like this little glass of bourbon with a cigar. So
yeah, their whiskey. That's off the table now. Yeah. All right. And this last one is complex, so I'm just going to read it verbatim. You shall not be allowed to subscribe to any internet service provider by modem, LAN, or DSL, or any other avenue, and shall not be allowed to use another person's internet or use the internet through any commercial venue until and unless approved by the supervision team. So, a little aside, that means somebody's got to, analyze and approve. When access has been approved, you agree to sign and comply with the conditions of the, quote, computer use agreement. Additionally, you will allow your probation officer or other person trained, including a non-judicial employee, to conduct computer searches, and the offender may be required to pay for such a search.
Oh my God, Sharon, that's his business.
Yeah.
Like his business is streaming services.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that, right? Yeah. All right, something else that I think we need to touch on related to the specifics of Steve's crime, and I promise you we're kind of winding up on this segment anyway. Of course, we know this was a task force operation designed to catch child sexual predators before they actually assaulted children in real life.
Thank God.
Yeah.
That's the only saving grace in this whole story. Yes.
Yeah. So the bait, if you will, in this case, was this fictitious 14-year-old girl being offered up by her mother to be sexually assaulted for money. So this is where the term trafficked comes into play. And I thought, okay, let me look and learn a little bit more about this aspect because I'm having so much fun with all of this, so much fun. And okay, Tracy, you owe me, girl, because I decided to take one for the team. I rented and made myself sit through that 2023 controversial film, Sound of Freedom.
Yeah. And
did you see that? Did you ever see it?
I did not see it, but I only knew of it because of the controversy. And I will be the first to admit that I'm like, how can being against sex trafficking be controversial, right?
Right.
Can't we all agree to be against sex trafficking?
Yeah. Well, for anyone not fully familiar, this was released last year. It tells the more or less true story. Actually, let me put an emphasis. It's less of a true story of this guy who rescues trafficked children from Central America.
And this movie was kind of a lightning rod or a darling crusade of the far right.
Yeah.
Think hashtag save the children.
Right.
With lots of inferences that the Democrats were behind a giant international child kidnapping and prostitution ring.
Right.
And I just have to say, yes, crazy stuff like that. But then when Epstein broke, right, there was some crazy stuff with all of this.
True.
Kind of understand how some of this stuff gets some legs because that stuff seemed almost too unreal to believe.
Yeah. So
I didn't watch it. I did not watch it. I have to control certain types of stuff.
I hear you.
I don't, for the joy after a long day at work, want to come home and watch child trafficking.
Right. So I just want to say 4 things about this movie.
Just 4? 4.
Just 4. All right. First, I did appreciate, I truly did, its portrayal of the terror that any child would feel in an abusive situation. And I would hope that everyone watching this, that it would foster just empathy, for children. And hopefully it did that. That was the one good thing I could find out of it. All right. Number 2, as far as just like a film quality level, because I do love movies and I do appreciate good movies, it was way too long and drawn out. And it was filled with all this like self-important fluff, like these brooding headshots of the lead character and restating things over and over. And anyway, just stuff like that. So it was way too long.
Not like our episodes, but go on.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Third, from an accuracy and practical perspective, the statistics that roll in the credits at the end of this movie, they were so fucking off base, totally sensationalized. I mean,
Wow.
yeah.
And that's why people had such a problem with it, right?
Well, one of the reasons.
Okay.
And the fourth, and this would be, I think, the worst of all, I don't know, maybe it's just as bad as number 3. The premise is very misleading as to what the real problems are with child trafficking. So it's not to say that this sort of thing, like kidnapping by a stranger, that never, ever happens. Not saying that. But all the statistics, all the studies, everything I could find says it's very rare, very rare. So most trafficked children, they're not kidnapped. They are put in that position by their own parents, right? Just like the sting operation that Steve got caught in.
Just like the sting operation, yeah.
And especially the youngest children, all right? And there's all kinds of stuff behind the whys of that, societal stuff, breakdown, that we just can't go into that. But the other huge reality is that many of these trafficked children, they're runaways. And often they're like early teen or teenagers. They're LGBTQ kids. They've been rejected by their families. They've got nowhere to live, and they just get caught up into it. So one of the problems is what this movie does is sort of a sleight of hand. It's like, look over here, look over here. Let's get all indignant about our political enemies and people with brown skin, right? It fosters this tainted outrage. And there's this blind cheerleading of the religious right, while the real problem, it's hiding in plain sight, Tracy. The real wolves are in sheep's clothing, right?
Oh, yeah. And I guess, that is such an important tie-in to what we're talking about right here. The fact that there are paying customers like Steve Greisen, lauded in his community, respected, high pedigree, and those who view child sexual abuse photos and videos, they are the ones creating the demand for this abuse.
Yep. And the self-righteous, ridiculous Christian conspiracists, hey people, wake up and look in the fucking pews of your church. That's where a lot of the problem can be found.
And it's awful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And
Hey. You've already used way more than 4. And I almost missed it because I'm just pondering these deep thoughts right now.
Okay. You want more time to ponder?
No, go ahead. Is this 6, 5,
No,
10?
it's not 5. Okay. It's just information for people who want to learn more. There are 2 great podcasts that delve deeper into all the shit about this movie, as well as the real truth about trafficking. We'll put them in the show notes. Podcasts are Oh No, Ross and Carrie, and You're Wrong About ... Okay, that's that. One of the last things, and I would need to research this further, but from what I can gather so far, the majority of sexual assaults on children and teens are committed by people these children know. And that is the betrayal beyond words.
Yeah, it is. And that's, I think you captured much more eloquently than my initial thoughts on why this crime, as we were reading it, that Steve committed is just so terrible that he's actually conversing with who he thinks is a mother of this child.
Yeah.
A mother of this fucking child. And, you know, I also did some research in the Colorado Springs area, and the amount of churches and the amount of ministries that actually have child sex trafficking saving programs, right?
Oh, God, how ironic, huh?
It is. And I kind of posted a list of those. And I think one of the contacts I had said pretty much every church in the area has something to do with sex trafficking, like saving these children. And to not be too cynical, because it is what gets people to donate.
Money.
And then you have the ones in the pews who are creating this demand, the ones who are going to Super Bowls and making sure that they follow these ads, and then there's no prison time, right? So
yeah, you know, I wonder, something just struck me. I wonder if it's one of those sort of things where, you know how you know how it seemed like those fire and brimstone preachers that preach the hardest against homosexuality, they turn out to be gay?
Yes.
So wouldn't it be ironic if all these ministries that are going so hard against sex traffickers is because they're all trying to hide the fact that they are either pedophiles or hebephiles, or they just love fucking kids?
Well, you've taken us down a very deep rabbit hole.
Yes.
But we are in danger of having a review that we're way too long and self-important. So I would like to pivot.
I hope somebody will say that about us.
You
that we're
hope somebody will say
long.
We're
Way too long.
Too long and self-important.
But then say not really. No, well.
Yeah. So let's pivot and talk about, despite his deep faith, all his life work, all his Christian heritage, all of that, Sharon. And we know this teaching, right? And this was not just, Sunday school. This was like intensive Christian training, if I might even say, did not prevent him from destroying his life and legacy and pretty much wrecking his family and his extended family. I mean, and a lot of us know the second chapter of Acts family and the trauma that they came to Jesus from. I mean, they have a pretty heart-wrenching family story. And to think of Nelly going through all that and finding Jesus and getting married and having kids and then having this be that end, that's what I was really broken up about. Really, really terrible. And why? Why, Sharon? Why didn't it stop him from that?
Why didn't all the faith help? Why did his faith fail? So, we're going to delve into that, but we're going to have to tackle it in another episode because, Tracy, true to form, we've got the longest damn episodes ever.
And I'm like, thank God we're going to tackle that. But guys, this has been a setup, and I really think that's part of the really important conversations that we need to have.
Yeah.
Why did his faith fail?
Why?
And, a lot of people have accused you and I, Sharon, of, well, we were never Christians to begin with. And we're like, oh, really?
Right.
And I think it's really easy to do that with headlines, right? With the headlines of these people.
Yeah.
But were there red flags? And we'll start to talk about that. But we do know that he was embedded in the heart of the heart of the heart of what it meant to follow Jesus.
Well, Tracy, if he's sorry, then he's in a better place than you and me with our steaming vat of rebellious witchery. I mean, that's the truth. So
yeah, I mean, some people would look at this as like it's a chance to really embrace God's forgiveness and his redemption. And you know what? We'll be able to test some of that if we hear back on the email. If it's not just brushed under the carpet and turned away.
Right.
And we'll be getting into that too, because, again, a lot of, even companies, secular companies, when they have, mass failure, moral failures, they send in investigators. They find out why. They get rid of, cultures and people to make it different. And this just fell silent.
Yeah.
What happened?
All right. So I'm not sure, Tracy, that we're going to make it back in 2 weeks. It might take a little bit longer. Don't know. But let's go ahead and sign off. And hey, in the meantime, everyone, our first request is please, pretty please, if you haven't already, please rate us on your podcast platform. And even better, if you can, leave a quick review, even if it's only a few words saying we are way too fucking long in our episodes. That's fine. And after that, check out our Instagram, feetofclay.cultsisters.
Yes. And again, if we're too long, put us at a higher speed. Listen to us really high. Listen to us talk like this. And it'll go faster. So remember, we have a private Facebook group also where you can join in the conversations with other listeners. And that's Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters Community. And you can also go to our link tree on our Instagram page and see all the different places where we are at. So thank you so much for listening, for bearing with us through some of this hard stuff. And I like to say that we might be back in 2 weeks-ish. Weeks-ish?
Ish.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Fuck, that was long.
Oh, yes. Yes, it was.